necessitated. You need a guide to show you how we get through a situation like this, to give you resources and to help you get out of the emotional pea soup fog of dealing with a crisis and the resulting fallout. I've been there, and I'm here to help you. Out of the fog. If you weren't emotionally bound up in your situation, you would have more clarity. You would be able to see your best options for dealing with whatever comes up. If the version of yourself who has already walked through this rock bottom and come out the other end could go back in time and give you, the you right now, some advice, what would she say? Would she tell you to slow down, to stop rushing, that you don't have to have all the answers today? Would the future you recommend not making any major decisions without reviewing them first, particularly while you're still in the fog? Would she tell you that normal is going to look different for a while, but that you will feel normal again? In case we haven't invented time travel by the time you read this book, I'm here to tell you all of the above. I developed the Boots formula to help you learn to make choices, have a life shift, and make great things happen based on your individual values and best life vision. A change is going to happen, and it's worth it. There's a stage where it feels like everyone in your life is picking at you. Life itself may seem like it's trying its best to stop you from doing whatever you want to do. All you hear is, "That's a stupid idea," and "That's never going to work," and "Who do you think you are?" One of the hardest things for people to do is to realign and possibly walk away from anything and anyone that conflicts with their value systems. But you are going to discover that power within yourself. Through the activities and examples in this book, you will discover your true north and will be able to easily do what is needed to move forward with your life. Anything that hurts you, that doesn't resonate for you, that fights against what you want and believe in, you are going to give it the boot. Once you have turned your rock bottom moment into a positive, beautiful life shift, you can live your life on your terms. Your life will probably look different, but you get to design it this time. You are taking your life back, and you are in charge, not anybody else. Sooner than you can imagine, you'll be in the career of your dreams or the relationship you always wanted. Because you are going to learn to develop healthy boundaries. Because you are going to do things differently along the way from here to there. You will begin to attract the people, the job, the place to live, all of the opportunities that align with who you are, your essence, your truth, not anybody else's or even society's expectations of the way you're supposed to be. Once you have accepted that you are in charge of living your life and you begin to embody living your truth, people are going to see you. They're going to be inspired by you. Then you're going to hear, "Hey, can you show me how you did that? I want to do it too." When you assess your peer group and up-level according to your life purpose and vision, and once you have created a life shift for yourself, whatever that looks like, your life is not just full, it's fulfilled. Not only do you get more and better sleep, you wake up feeling rested and happy. You know that you're doing what you need to do. Yes, sometimes your heart will call you to leave certain friends or family members in order to find a more aligned peer group. From what I've seen, however, the ones who leave always return to lead their family and friends to success. Because your friends are more in alignment with your beliefs and value system, they support you while also pushing you toward your personal best. Life still involves work, but as a whole, it feels far more effortless. But you don't have to wait for the right person, right job, or right investment opportunity to show up. You can start living now so that every moment as you go forward through the process of recovering from rock bottom and redesigning your life is one more step to being the best version of you, the one who came. All right, if you are looking to reinvent life on your terms, if you are grieving, experiencing financial turmoil, career shifts, relationship problems, parenting, elder care, victims of abuse, breaking free from an addiction, or seeking an overall business and lifestyle redesign, then you may need a reboot. Is not fits all, just like a pair of boots or a bra. So the formula is designed to help you through any situation.
Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio. If you're ready to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and bra straps, enjoy a listen. Here's
All right, welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today we have special guest, Robert Yoho. Robert calls himself a healthcare whistleblower. He practiced medicine in the U.S. and retired 2 years ago. He was a board-certified emergency physician and cosmetic surgeon. He has recently published 2 books, Butchered by Healthcare and Hormone Secrets. So we have a lot to talk about. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you, Sheila. Let me just do the 10-second disclaimer. I'm sorry I have to do this, but the legal environment dictates it. So this isn't healthcare advice, and you should you get a regular licensed physician if you have problems with your health and you need to work on it, and take this as general information only.
Yes, definitely.
Sorry. Yeah,
I totally 100% agree. And that is the way it is. And different things work for different people or are helpful in aiding when you're working with a doctor to do some alternative healthy things as well. So that does make sense. So now this show actually came about based on my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. And this last almost 2 years now, oh my gosh, we have had just about every situation you could fathom and then some. And so I'd love to start off by asking if you have a time in your business or personal life where you experienced a tough situation and how you got back up.
Sheila, you're asking the toughest questions first. I had about 5 years ago, nearing the end of my career. I'm 67 now, and maybe it was even 6 years ago. I had 2 fatalities within 5 or 6 months in my surgical center, and I was working as a cosmetic surgeon. When you're supposed to be infallible in practice, most cosmetic surgeons have a fatality during their career, and in fact, one of these patients I didn't operate on; it was someone else. But nevertheless, you feel responsible, and the situation's complicated, and I did detail that in Butchered by Healthcare, which is my book. So what happened to me was I entered a period of introspection. I knew I was nearing retirement, and I essentially transformed myself into an author. And I've done that 50 to 60 hours a week ever since.
Okay. Yes. And that is something that whenever you go in for any kind of something or, treatment, cosmetic or otherwise, where there's a risk.
The risks are small but real.
Yes. And there's a risk when you take a shower, you could slip on soap. So,
let's hope that doesn't happen, right?
It's crazy how things can happen. So we just have to do our best and make the wisest decisions possible when it comes to our healthcare, especially right now. Definitely. So, yeah. So then you decided to write these books. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the books and what's inside.
Well, I started researching healthcare corruption because I saw a lot of problems with the hormone standards. I primarily had women in my practice, and I was trained to use bioidentical hormones to help them during their with their menopause symptoms. And
Mhm.
so I offered this to my cosmetic surgery patients, and I didn't charge much, if anything. They paid me for the surgery, so I screened them for menopause symptoms, and if they were interested, which I'm not that persuasive, and I certainly don't try to persuade, but if they were interested, I offered them hormone therapy. And the results I saw were nothing short of miraculous. And I began to write my first book,
Mm.
Hormone Secrets, as my initial step. But I saw so many adulterated and ruined medical standards and so much false information about the hormones out there that I
Mhm.
started to investigate healthcare corruption. And I thought I'd have a can of worms, but I ended up with a dumpster full of worms. I mean, it's just freaking awful. And I could go into details about everything from the insurance industry to the various medical specialties to big pharma, if you'd like.
Yes. Yeah, that does make sense. And what would you say is the chapter in the book that really is the best chapter or best point regarding all that as far as
Well, if you if you want to do this the easy way, you can listen to the question is how can you scan this material? And I think once you get into it, I rewrote and rewrote and rewrote it down to an understandable level and tried to make it comprehensible to everyone, not just doctors. I mean, that's the fault of the doctors.
yeah.
We lapse into jargon all the time, and we're regarded as stuffed shirts because we talk in jargon, and it's hardly any fault of ours because we're trained to think in
Mhm.
those terms. But this is written down to a reasonable level. And if you guys go to, or your listeners go to robertyohoauthor.com, that's my website, you can download half of the thing on audio on YouTube or on a podcast like this. You can
Mhm.
listen to half of it. I didn't make the whole thing free. I did it first. And you can also download half the book. But the way to get into this is read the introductory chapters and then scan the section headings. And if you have medical problems, those are the areas you're going to be most interested in. I mean, if you've got
Mhm.
prostate cancer or you're worried about prostate cancer, you want to have a look at that. And if you're on 10 different medications, maybe you want to look at the big pharma chapters.
Right.
And if you're on psych medications, you want to read the 4 psych chapters.
Mm.
So that's the way to approach this. And if you're looking for solutions, I don't have a magic wand, but you can skip to the end and you can see what global solutions would work if we could manage the politics, which of course is impossible.
Right.
And you have a healthcare philosophy section that will help you cope with your aging and your mortality, and also help you cope with the hospitals and doctors you're likely to encounter along the way.
Mhm.
If your listeners are older, a lot of them have seen a lot of this and they're very disgusted with healthcare. If they're younger, they may not understand it. The only thing they may understand is that 20% of their pay goes to healthcare, whether that or not the corporation pays it. We're spending 20% of our gross domestic product on healthcare, and it's outrageous because the other countries, all the other developed countries like England, France, Canada, Australia spend 10%. So
Mm.
we're spending double and we're getting a terrible product. I mean, we're getting a product that's 50% ineffective or injurious, and that's not controversial academically.
Right.
That's there are dozens of references that say that.
Mm. That's so true. And I know for the hormones, I mean, I've definitely struggled. I have this PCOS thing going on in my
Yeah.
life. I have been like a student. I have met with the top doctors at all the top medical establishments trying to figure out what is the answer to this situation that's been my lifelong, struggle.
Yeah.
And it's something that, there's a lot of alternative things I add into what I do, and I'm very cautious about the drugs, and medications because they have all these other side effects. So it really is, if it's an issue in your life, it is an issue and something that, I believe over time, there is an answer to everything. But in the meanwhile, to do alternative medications or treatments or different therapies, and then also do whatever the doctor says in combination. That's what I tend to do because and I'll get like 5 opinions on something.
Yeah, good. That's
like,
good.
you know what? Last time I tried something without all these opinions, it wasn't so good. And it took me like months to get back on track. So
Your bottom line is how you feel. And if you don't feel good, you should get another opinion. And the great thing about today is we can get alternate opinions from almost anybody in the country. You can go to a large medical center virtually. And since the past president gave this declaration that we could see anyone virtually without fear, without them being afraid of the medical board reprisals. Prior to that, you were only supposed to see a doctor in person. But now we can go anywhere. If you have a few hundred or a few $1,000s, you can go to Harvard or Stanford and see the top people in the world. And so that's one answer. Another answer is that you said that you research it, and that's absolutely great. The third thing is that just because there are problems in aircraft design, that doesn't mean that magic carpets fly. And so Sheila, I'm not an alternative. I'm not an alternative believer, and I think these guys are sort of affecting some of the same swagger that we're seeing out of some of our crooked healthcare medical industry, and I think that they have less credibility, although there are things that work.
right.
And the last thing is that that PCOS is quite treatable if you find someone who's willing to give you the right drugs. And it's mainly progesterone in high doses, bioidentical progesterone. If you take enough of that, many times the symptoms will go away, and by God, you'll be fertile again if that makes a difference to you.
Oh,
So,
no, that's good.
Yeah.
I have 6 children that are all grown. I'm
6 children.
I mean,
Well, you may not be fertile again.
I adopted 3, but 3 of my own. But no, I'm good.
That's a lot of kids.
Oh,
That's
yes.
wonderful. Congratulations.
Yeah, but there's lots of things with that PCOS that's a battle for me, and for sure many others.
But I have a section about that, and I'm sorry to prep this, but
go
this is
ahead.
important for you. I have a section about that in Hormone Secrets.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful.
I'll send you a way to download it for free.
Oh,
Everybody else has got to spend $4 on the ebook.
I think it's worth it. Anything, because we spend so much time trying to figure things out, and then there's a certain point where the hormones shift. No matter who you are, if you don't even have this PCOS, you're just normal, and you get to a certain age and you notice, oh my gosh, you gained weight, even though you're doing the same thing and eating as healthy and still exercising the same, and all these things that are hormonal that are very frustrating. And then there's, you take these certain hormones that aren't bioidentical are like the worst, I think, because that just affects all kinds of other situations. So what advice do you have for someone that's in that phase of life where the hormones are starting to shift? I think it's like 10 years before you actually go through the change of life that you start really seeing changes.
So roughly at 40, and sometimes even in the 30s, some women's ovaries start to fail, and it's common. I've diagnosed women in their early 30s with 0 testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone levels, and the replacement of these things puts you right back on the beam. And the problem with this field is it's been so, the narratives are so crazy because the traditional physicians have one narrative, and the corporations have another because they want to sell patent drugs, and a lot of those are the old hormones like horse urine, estrogen, which is fine, but it's not as good as bioidentical estradiol. And just to tell you and at 40, of course, many women start to have a decline in their progesterone, and by 50, many of them lose all their estrogen as well. So there are symptoms along the way, which are characteristic of each phase, and every woman is different. And checking your levels is a good idea, unless you're clearly in menopause, with no menstrual periods and all that. And if you are, it's not against the rules to get your doctor to start you on bioidentical hormones from a compounding pharmacy. And we've launched into this hormone thing. I've got all the details of treatment and everything else in my little manual here. And this thing was written down to a 9th grade level, which is not condescending. What it means is that it's easy to read, So I recommend you do your research. And there are a couple of groups of doctors who are pretty good at this, and it's not the mainstream internists. It's people who have devoted themselves to hormone therapy and taken special training like I did. And
Mm.
I mean, I had a practice that was almost all composed of women who had these problems at the end of my career. And I really felt sorry for them. And a lot of them were thinking that cosmetic surgery could help their problem, help their
Oh,
depression and their anxiety and their muscle weakness and everything else. And sometimes maybe it did, but
yeah.
I tried to offer them a treatment, and this
Mm.
treatment had profound effects. I mean, just a testosterone alone, a little testosterone pellet that lasts 3 months, or testosterone cream, that can make a huge difference in alertness, intellectual ability, muscle tone, sexuality, the whole thing. I mean, it's a profound improvement. And men respond too, but I think this stuff is even more important for women.
Wow,
I,
that's great to know, and that's important to look into, because before you make a decision, look into all the options.
Let me ramble about one last thing. I didn't expect to spend so much time on hormone therapy, but here is something that should pull you into this book, The Hormone Secrets. And
Mm.
that is that Alzheimer's is probably the most expensive disease we have if you count long-term care costs. And use of estrogen after the menopause for the rest of your life prevents, in some studies, 80% of Alzheimer's. And instead, we use these toxic medications that cost thousands of dollars a month, and even their inventors can't admit with a straight face that they work. I mean, it's crazy. Every Alzheimer's, and it's too late once you have it. You can prevent it with estradiol. And in order to prove the credibility of my various theses, you can't put every reference in a book like this. I have 500 links in the ebook, but I put 75 references about the Alzheimer's and estrogen situation in Appendix C, so people could look at that and build on that to understand the credibility of the whole story. When we have things like testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone that have these warnings on it from the FDA, really scary warnings, and they're all a pack of lies. I mean, it's based on either study of the old hormones, the outmoded hormones, or sometimes I think the whole thing's fabricated. The testosterone, the heart disease and prostate cancer narratives about testosterone, it's crazy. And the physicians have banded together and established standards and so on and so forth, written papers, and given lie to all these crazy statements by the FDA.
Yes. Now, I'd love to segment into the other book that you have. And
No
one of
worries.
my crazy stories is, years ago when I first got diagnosed with this PCOS, I knew my hormones were off. I just knew it. And I mean, I was running 5 businesses at the time, 5 different gift stores. I had all these kids. I had all these things. I was very happy in my life, but I felt like my skin was crawling. And the doctor put me on some kind of,
Antidepressant.
yes. And I said, well, I don't take drugs. I don't drink. I'm like because of PCOS, I don't do alcohol because of the sugars. I don't do anything. And so I'm very clean, organic, all that stuff. And I took half of the dosage, and I was high for 3 days. And I said, oh my gosh, will I ever come back to normal? And I said, I can't do this, please. And they didn't want to check my hormones.
Yeah.
Because of my age, I was so young at the time.
Right.
They just knew I was depressed, which is
Well,
ridiculous. I
yeah.
had time to be depressed. I was running businesses and children, raising kids. So that was something that don't always believe, or sometimes you may have a symptom of depression or something else, but it's a hormone or a vitamin deficiency or something that's really easy to take care of.
Easy.
Yeah.
And in this book, there are references to physician organizations who largely have similar thought processes, and even a few specific physicians who you can consult with over the internet or whatever, who understand these issues thoroughly. And I recommend reading this thing and understanding it yourself, because if you don't, the doctors are busy. I mean, we are consumed with charting and patient care and our staff management and everything else. And it's impossible for us to pay enough attention to anybody. So you have to know what you want. You almost need physician level expertise these days to get good healthcare, especially if you have a complicated problem. And this hormone thing is poorly treated by 90% plus of the physicians out there. And I mean, we have professional groups, but there are only a few thousand people. There's a larger one with 26,000 people, but I think they're a little more uneven. And the one I belong to, my mentor who put a lot of this material together, he's got a uniform theories, and I think our success rate is phenomenal. I mean, I had wonderful successes, and I think I could have handled you when I was still working pretty easily. And I think you should still check your levels and go to
Right.
one of these people.
Definitely. Yeah, that sounds great. And see how the answers show up? I'm not even looking. I'm having a show and here's answers for me. Isn't that wonderful? And I know somebody listening in is like, "Oh, yes, I have got to get this book and figure this out and get the right doctors and treatment." So that is wonderful. Now, I'd love to hear about the other book about the healthcare business that we're in
Yeah,
right now.
it's okay. So this is a bit of a gloomy story, and I don't want everyone to think that I have no respect for doctors or that I don't believe that miracles occur every day in healthcare. I believe both of those things. I respect doctors, and I think even if you get the wrong information from somebody, maintain your respectful attitude towards them. Use them for whatever they have. Go see some other people, and don't lose faith in the healthcare system, because if you have a real problem, if you have cancer, you're getting older, you've got one of these complicated syndromes, or you have something like PCOS, which is poorly treated by a lot of people, you've got to skip around until you find the right answer. And one of the other great advantages we have in the internet era is we have these patient groups, and there are people in those groups who sometimes have as much individual knowledge about a condition as any doctor, and they will help you for free. I mean, it's just a wonderful thing. Now, these things are sponsored by big pharma. They're frequently trying to promote some medications, so I take everything with a grain of salt. But the individuals there, you can learn about their experiences and so on. So what we've done with healthcare is we've rained money out of the sky on it. It's just an insane thing. We've given them this huge chunk that they're so big. They're as big, this $4 trillion industry, which is the same size as the federal government. I mean, it's the federal government's 3.5 trillion in tax revenues, and God knows what else they're spending. So they're maybe a little bigger, but I mean, it's their lobbying power of healthcare beats any two other industries, including oil and gas and military and all that stuff. It's just overwhelming in our Congress, in our U.S. Congress. Now, they don't have all the state legislatures bought, but and just think, Apple and Google alone, the market caps are as big as the federal government or healthcare. I mean, it's crazy. So here's how the parts interlock. Okay, so the FDA is our supposed regulatory agency, and they sometimes do a good job. Like today, they seem to have had a regulatory committee that said that we should not have, they didn't approve the follow-up vaccine boosters, right? And this is a big surprise for observers like me, because I thought they were completely bought off. The FDA, their budget is well over half, perhaps 2/3, supplied directly by the industry players. And this is how it works. There are these things called user fees that occur during the course of the patenting of drugs, and they get paid by the pharmaceutical companies directly to the FDA. And this turned the FDA into regarding the pharmaceutical companies as clients rather than entities to be regulated. And you can imagine, I mean, it's an enormous conflict of interest, perhaps even could be considered bribery. So you have to understand influence theory, and I can ramble on, or you can ask me questions. But influence theory means that anytime money changes hands, the well is poisoned. And when I started reading about this stuff, I just couldn't believe that doctors could be bought. Right? It just didn't seem possible. I mean, we had all this training, we had ethical training, the patient was supposed to be first, but you realize after a while that when somebody receives $300,000 or $400,000 a year from a pharmaceutical company, like the editors of every major journal, every single one, right? They inevitably can't split off their own interests from the interests of the donor, right? You can't do that. It's impossible. And so Cicero said it best. He said, it's I'm just slipping on the quote. He's okay. So the FDA and the influence theory and the journals and the editors, and you got to understand what you're dealing with these pharmaceutical companies. They have had more criminal settlements than any industry in history. Now you can look that up on Wikipedia. It's very easy to find. And they're just, and some of the close observers, Peter Gercha and Rost, who's a whistleblower, they have characterized these people as mobsters. Those aren't my words, they're their words. And so, I mean, it's a crazy, crazy system, and you can't trust anyone except for people you have personal contact with that you find credible and so on. So what's happened is the studies have been ruined by these people that Gercha calls mobsters, right? And so we can't depend on anything they say. It's particularly worse over the past 10 years. And what they do is they use contract research groups in other countries and pay them off and tell them what to say. They use statistical frauds inside of the articles, like they did with the COVID studies, the vaccine studies. The quote vaccine is not really a vaccine. It doesn't confer immunity. And they conceal things that are critical, like they did with the HPV vaccine. They threw away half the studies. Japan threw out the HPV vaccine. They don't use it. 1% of their people, and it's still used universally here because the pharmaceutical companies are such a big influence in Europe, in the U.S. and Europe. So, I mean, it's just a wild scene. And here's a quote from the CEO responsible for chloramphenicol. That was an antibiotic that killed a lot of people. He said, this is an old story. This guy's name is Harry Loynd, and he said, if we put horse manure in a capsule, we could sell it to 95% of these doctors. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with amoral industry who's and it's not just pharma, it's the device industry and the rest of medical care, the hospitals, the whole thing, who they don't put patient care first and individual patients first. They're into making money, and you can understand why. I mean, that's the way they're set up. But somehow trying to figure this thing out for a patient's not an easy task.
Right. And one thing I've noticed is, raising these 6 beautiful children, and they all had their own things, 3 mine, 3 that I adopted. So, we have this beautiful group of children in our lives, and they all had different challenges over their, colds, flus, whatever normal things, and this and that. And when we would go to overnight with the school on some type of field trip outing to somewhere or something, you'd have to check in medications. And my kids, they didn't have any medications.
Why do they have medications, at that age? I mean, it's crazy.
This was like 5th grade. I remember 5th grade, one of my sons, and I was assisting, like a volunteer mom, like you do. And all these kids, everyone had a bag of medicine.
Oh God.
And I was like, how is this? And this was like a very, upscale community, a private, semi-private Montessori school. And so, it was people that had a lot of money to spend, and their children had bags, not even just 1 or 2 things, like bags of medications, many of them. And I was like, well, they were like, what do you take? And I said, well, we do take like a multivitamin. That's it.
Which we don't give to the kids when they go to camp.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all good. And then, if they were sick with something that they needed an antibiotic, they're not going on the trip. So that's kind of it. So that was something that really, now this was a while ago, because these kids are now in their 20s and above. So when you think about it, that was a while ago, and people bought the story. And I mean, maybe I can't imagine that all the children were really that sick, because I saw them playing. They all seemed very healthy and running around and everything else. There was quite a few with the Adderall or something similar as well. And so that was another thing. Yeah, that was
So let's discuss your experience with getting prescribed an SSRI, probably for a SSRI is a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, whatever it is, which is like Prozac, right? Prozac or Paxil.
It was Paxil.
It was Paxil.
Yes.
So Jesus, Paxil is notorious for causing agitation, and the whole class of these drugs, the SSRIs, are notorious for causing violence and suicide.
Oh
And
my.
this was concealed by Lilly, who was the Prozac manufacturer, in their initial studies. They didn't turn it in, or they didn't show it up, or whatever it was. And later, when they started having all these suicides, they brought it out in discovery in the courtroom, right? And ever since then, they have settled hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm not hundreds, tens of millions of dollars, maybe $100 million worth of suicide and violence lawsuit, and covered it all up. Everybody signs non-disclosure, whatever it is. And so that's the problem with that. That's the major problem with that drug.
Yeah.
So what happens now is these things are heavily promoted, and the doctors often work for groups that even monitor the percent of people that these people prescribe for, the doctors prescribe for. And if you're below a certain percentage, you're out of the boxes.
Yeah.
Psychiatry is a funny specialty. It's a group that has a lot of people who think that it's completely illegitimate and that the drug should never be used. And this is besides just Scientologists who somehow figured it out 20 years before everybody else. But this includes journalists who've examined literature and so on. And the problem, according to a journalist named Whitaker, who wrote a definitive book about this, is that there are no or very few studies using a sugar pill control for psych drugs. And the reason is they got everybody on psych drugs already. We have 17% of the whole country on psych drugs. And we laugh, Sheila, but it's not a joke, because these things really mess you up, and they interfere with the process of experiencing pain, which will take you through and make you grow. And I mean, and you mentioned the other class. Another class of these drugs that are used is the stimulants, and these things freaking shrink your brain. I mean, they're ubiquitous in private schools. They're ubiquitous at Ivy League schools. I mean, my kids went to an Ivy League school, and this stuff was everywhere. They could get it from their friends. A third of the kids had prescriptions. So, I mean, the people that started this whole thing 20, 15 years ago, many of them have stepped out of the herd and said, this is crazy. We got to stop this. But, once a bell is rung, it's hard to unring. And just like, the Prozac thing, have you ever heard of the chemical imbalance in the brain thing?
Right.
Well, you know what that is? That's a marketing slogan made up in the marketing department of Smith, Kline, and Beecham. That's not science. And the real scientists laugh at that. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. The third class of these drugs is called atypical antipsychotics. And the Zyprexa is the first one, I believe. And these things shorten your lifespan by 10 to 20 years, but they are passed out like jelly beans for people that don't seem to be, quote, responding, unquote, to the SSRI antidepressants. I mean, it's crazy. Military recruits are often given a freaking little brown bag full of this stuff. I'm exaggerating, of course, for color, but the military, they're dosed with these things, and when they get out, I mean, these kids are screwed up, and these things are the drugs are highly addictive. I mean, they're very hard. You experienced akathisia, which is a anxiety or nervousness that, I mean, if it was worse, you might freaking kill yourself, and that's what happens. I mean, I have a close friend whose husband threw themselves in front of a train 2 or 3 weeks after they started Paxil. And and she started a foundation about it.
Half of one pill. I only took half of one pill just to see what it would do. And I was out of it for 3 days.
Well, you had sense enough not to take another one. Your doctor would have told you to take 3 or 4 more.
They did. They totally gave me like so many, 2 or something at least. And I took half of one. I took the smallest. I cut it in half. I was so afraid. And thank goodness I did, or I don't know, I'd probably still be high from that thing. I was so out of my mind. I was like, I can't drive. I can't do any. I guess it gave me that paranoid feeling, or I don't know, anxiety. I felt like I was in a bubble.
Well, fortunately, you didn't kill anybody, and you didn't commit suicide.
No, I was just like, you know what? Everybody keep an eye on me, because this is a weird feeling.
There are other drugs that cause that besides the psych drugs, and so it's a well-known complication. It's a intolerable restlessness.
Wow, it was definitely memorable. For 3 days, I was like, will I ever be normal again? That was my concern. I was like, can I like to think. I use my mind a lot, running businesses with kids, helping with schools, all these things. I love my mind, and so that was really important. Now, one of the things that a lot of the parents and families that came to the Montessori school were pulling their kids out of the public that were demanding the Ritalin or the Adderall or whatever. And so a lot of the children did go to the Amen Clinic, and I was very happy with the way they did their studies. And actually, sometimes they would use vitamin therapy and change in diet, and the medication was like a last resort. And so that really helped a lot of families that came over to the Montessori. And then they had the Montessori, it was a different style of learning, so they didn't have to sit at a desk. They could do what they call a job and do one thing and then learn another. And it was great for the younger kids. We don't all have desk jobs when we grow up. So.
My kids went to Montessori school too, and it was wonderful.
Yes.
So that's a plug for Montessori. I mean,
there you go.
They were really, really super nice. I had a wild son who ran up the trees and wouldn't come down off the fences, and they were very patient with him.
Right. Yes. It makes a big difference. My sons that were like the A students, the top students in Montessori, when they transferred over to the very disciplined, they ended up going to a Catholic school for a while, very disciplined. They were a complete fail. It was too much structure. And then we transferred to something different and they were great again. And so really think about the environment for your children. How does environment play a role in treatment or healing or whatever versus just drugs?
Well, I wrote about the diets and what's reasonable about the diets and Butchered by Healthcare. And the environment, certainly your diet is part of the environment, and these high carbohydrate diets have probably caused the obesity epidemic, and all this crazy stuff about don't eat animal fats and don't eat fats, that all correlates precisely with the increase in our obesity. And so, and I think that these all this ADHD and all these constructed diagnoses by doctors who are being paid by industry to make up things, and that's what all these diagnoses are. There are people that are in bed with industry who have written that DSM. You've heard of that Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatry. Well, they all have huge conflict of interest. That's the kindest way to put it. And the accurate way to put it might be that they're paid by these industry sources. So I think probably the most important thing in a kid's environment is this diet. And if you can introduce fats to the exclusion of all these carbohydrates, especially the simple carbohydrates, I think that, I'm sorry, I've got to put this off. Just let me.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm sorry, Sheila. I didn't turn off my freaking phone.
It's alarming. The alarm went off, and it is alarming what happens. So if you have children or yourself and you get one diagnosis and put on some type of a medication that concerns you, then it is good to have different opinions. Get the book, read up about it, and see who you can connect with to get some alternative help.
You know what another name for ADHD is? It's called being a boy. I mean, it's a crazy thing. In some southern states, in certain areas, they have a quarter or half the kids on these stimulants, and it slows them down, but it's not good for them.
Yes, and you think the increases really happened because now we have video games.
I don't know. I don't speak to that.
And they sit at a desk all day when they really need to go like run.
They need to be chased around the schoolyard.
Play games and that to get the energy out. So, I mean, I actually helped teach at some of these schools. And a lot of times if the kids were misbehaving, I'd make them go do laps, and then they come in like done, and they'd sit and do their work. And
you're my kind of teacher.
Yeah, it was great. It was perfect. And so it was just like, okay, we all need to take a break. Let's go run some laps. And then they were tired and they would focus. And it was simple. It didn't cost anything, no medications, and it really made a difference in the classroom. So, so I'd love to hear, we're coming to the end of our talking time, Robert. I'd love to hear where people can get these books and learn more about all you're doing.
Well, I probably have 100 5-star reviews on Amazon already, and you can find these things on Amazon. You can Google my name, or the easiest thing is to look at robertyohoauthor.com and grab all the freebies you can first. And then if you want to buy the books, you can download half of them at my website. It's not just 10% like Amazon. And and you can listen to the, I put them all in audio form. And, this is not a moneymaker, Sheila. I mean, I'm pretty obscure. I probably sold less than 2,000 books, but I'm selling 30 a day. Anyway, I believe in what I'm doing. I think awareness will help.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, for those tuning in, we'll be back after these messages. Thank you, Robert, for being a guest on the show.
Thank you, Sheila.
All right, everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back.
If you are just tuning in, this is NBC's Sheila Mac Show here on KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today I have a couple of announcements. First, I would like to hear from you. That's right. I would love to hear from you. To be honest, I want to know what your breakthrough is, what your reboot is. How are you reinventing and rebooting your life? What shows would you like to hear more of? What information do you need to help you get back on track this year? And to do that, the best way to connect with me is actually through my new YouTube channel, and that is Sheila Mac Show on YouTube. And there you can see past recordings, and you can also see other information and shares that I have. And I would love for you to share in the comments there what you're needing more of and what you're rebooting this year and how we can help you get back on track. If you are just tuning in, this is NBC's Sheila Mac Show here on KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today I have a couple of announcements. First, I would like to hear from you. That's right. I would love to hear from you. To be honest, I want to know what your breakthrough is, what your reboot is. How are you reinventing and rebooting your life? What shows would you like to hear more of? What information do you need to help you get back on track this year? And to do that, the best way to connect with me is actually through my new YouTube channel, and that is Sheila Mac Show on YouTube. And there you can see past recordings, and you can also see other information and shares that I have. And I would love for you to share in the comments there what you're needing more of and what you're rebooting this year and how we can help you get back on track. If you are just tuning in, this is NBC's Sheila Mac Show here on KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today I have a couple of announcements. First, I would like to hear from you. That's right. I would love to hear from you. To be honest, I want to know what your breakthrough is, what your reboot is. How are you reinventing and rebooting your life? What shows would you like to hear more of? What information do you need to help you get back on track this year? And to do that, the best way to connect with me is actually through my new YouTube channel, and that is Sheila Mac Show on YouTube. And there you can see past recordings, and you can also see other information and shares that I have. And I would love for you to share in the comments there what you're needing more of and what you're rebooting this year and how we can help you get back on track.
Hello and welcome to another live episode edition of the Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Roberts, and today I have Miss Sheila Mac. She is a coach and she is an author of her new book, which is called Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. Welcome, Sheila. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I just am so glad to be on and share about this during this time.
Yes. You know, I was reading your book, and I'd love for us to kind of start in the beginning of your story. And you come from a divorced home. You lived with your grandparents and your mom for a while. You also were in foster care for a while. I'd love for you to take us back kind of, under the age of 18, what life was like for you at that point.
Wow. Life was very interesting. So my parents, I think they got divorced when I was 2 or 3. My first language was Spanish. And when I moved in with my grandparents, I was slapped every time I spoke Spanish. And so I had to learn English. And I remember translating from Spanish to English to be able to speak. and being afraid to share my voice, which is really interesting because now I do a lot of sharing. And so that was the beginning. And I had incredible experiences. I ended up going from home to home. So sometimes I was with one set of grandparents, the other set of grandparents, with different family members, friends, going throughout. And there was some abuse that happened, which happens to, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's like 70, 80% of people have had some form of abuse by the time they're 18. So you're not alone if you've gone through something, for sure. And for me, it was very violent. And at one point I was at a home that my mother was visiting, and she was like, you got to go, you got to get out because it's so dangerous. Pets were being killed. I was being abused terribly. And so I left. And one of the things that happened before that, that stuck in my mind all the years later, was my grandmother on one side. She had a group of very incredible women. They were all stoic older women, I don't know, 70s, 80s. Maybe they were younger because I was, 5 or something. And they would get together and have coffee and tea, and they would discuss what they went through in their life. So one lady had lost her entire family, brothers, sisters, and parents in a concentration camp. Another lady, her and her husband escaped a country to come to this country. They didn't speak English, and they left every single thing. They didn't have a penny. And another lady, she lost her husband, and she owned a Greek restaurant. It was a very famous Greek restaurant in LA over the years, but it was back in the day when everybody was against a woman running a business. So she had to really step up and own her strength and say, no, I'm going to do this. I got this. I can do it. And so these were the type of people that I heard these living history stories from. And I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder what my adventure is going to be. And I could see that life has waves. It doesn't matter where you're planted, whatever it is, you're going to go through something and to get to that beautiful place. And so it's like, how do you show up in everything that makes a difference? So I carried those beautiful stories with me. I did end up, that time that my mother told me, you got to get out, it was very violent. Like once I was knocked out and didn't wake up until the next day, that kind of thing. And so, but you're little, you don't know the difference because that's what you're living, you don't have much control when you're little.
Necessitated. You need a guide to show you how we get through a situation like this, to give you resources and to help you get out of the emotional pea soup fog of dealing with a crisis and the resulting fallout. I've been there, and I'm here to help you. Out of the fog. If you weren't emotionally bound up in your situation, you would have more clarity. You would be able to see your best options for dealing with whatever comes up. If the version of yourself who has already walked through this rock bottom and come out the other end could go back in time and give you, the you right now, some advice, what would she say? Would she tell you to slow down, to stop rushing, that you don't have to have all the answers today? Would the future you recommend not making any major decisions without reviewing them first, particularly while you're still in the fog? Would she tell you that normal is going to look different for a while, but that you will feel normal again? In case we haven't invented time travel by the time you read this book, I'm here to tell you all of the above. I developed the REBOOTS formula to help you learn to make choices, have a life shift, and make great things happen based on your individual values and best life vision. A change is going to happen, and it's worth it. There's a stage where it feels like everyone in your life is picking at you. Life itself may seem like it's trying its best to stop you from doing whatever you want to do. All you hear is, that's a stupid idea, and that's never going to work, and who do you think you are? One of the hardest things for people to do is to realign and possibly walk away from anything and anyone that conflicts with their value systems. But you are going to discover that power within yourself. Through the activities and examples in this book, you will discover your true north and will be able to easily do what is needed to move forward with your life. Anything that hurts you, that doesn't resonate for you, that fights against what you want and believe in, you are going to give it the boot. Once you have turned your rock bottom moment into a positive, beautiful life shift, you can live your life on your terms. Your life will probably look different, but you get to design it this time. You are taking your life back, and you are in charge, not anybody else. Sooner than you can imagine, you'll be in the career of your dreams or the relationship you always wanted. Because you are going to learn to develop healthy boundaries. Because you are going to do things differently along the way from here to there. You will begin to attract the people, the job, the place to live, all of the opportunities that align with who you are, your essence, your truth, not anybody else's or even society's expectations of the way you're supposed to be. Once you have accepted that you are in charge of living your life and you begin to embody living your truth, people are going to see you. They're going to be inspired by you. Then you're going to hear, "Hey, can you show me how you did that? I want to do it too." When you assess your peer group and up-level according to your life purpose and vision, and once you have created a life shift for yourself, whatever that looks like, your life is not just full, it's fulfilled. Not only do you get more and better sleep, you wake up feeling rested and happy. You know that you're doing what you need to do. Yes, sometimes your heart will call you to leave certain friends or family members in order to find a more aligned peer group. From what I've seen, however, the ones who leave always return to lead their family and friends to success. Because your friends are more in alignment with your beliefs and value system, they support you while also pushing you toward your personal best. Life still involves work, but as a whole, it feels far more effortless. But you don't have to wait for the right person, right job, or right investment opportunity to show up. You can start living now so that every moment as you go forward through the process of recovering from rock bottom and redesigning your life is one more step to being the best version of you, the one who came.
All right, if you are looking to reinvent life on your terms, if you are grieving, experiencing financial turmoil, career shifts, relationship problems, parenting, elder care, victims of abuse, breaking free from an addiction, or seeking an overall business and lifestyle redesign, then you may need a reboot. It is not fits all, just like a pair of boots or a bra. So the formula is designed to help you through any situation.